All right. Good evening, everybody. How's everybody doing? Good. Thanks for coming out. We've got a really great panel of people here to talk to you. My name is Eric. I'm from the Career Development Center here at Berkeley, and my role is here is to help students connect with the right resources, the right people, the right advising as much as possible. On your seats, there are a little note. This is an event tonight to help you prepare for an event this Saturday. It's called the Career Jam, and it's 12 to 5. It's going to be in the Uchida building. There's a website, berkeley.edu/career-jam. And if you can, please RSVP. It's going to be very limited space. But what's happening there is there's going to be a bunch of music industry professionals. They're going to talk about building your career in performance and technology and writing and film scoring, all sorts of things. There'll be an artist resource fair with a bunch of different kind of companies that will help you get along the way. Presskit.to is one that will be there to help you with your press kit. The Recording Arts Project from Harvard, which is free legal advice for musicians. For you guys, that would be great people to get in touch with. So if you can, check out the website, RSVP. If you can, that would be greatly appreciated. Tonight, we have a great panel. I'll introduce them real quick, and then we'll kind of get into it. Just keep in mind, this is an open conversation. It's not a lecture. We want you guys to ask questions. They're very funny individuals. You'll tell from just getting to hear from a little bit. A little bit background about myself. Before I came to Berkeley, I was a booking agent, a manager, worked as a touring bassist in New York, so I'll chime in with a little bit about this stuff. But tonight really is going to be about building your career. How they got started. They're both in really, I would say, big bands for Boston. They're really up and coming. They have a really great following, really great social media presence. If you can, check out their websites. If you want to follow with them afterwards, they'll be more than welcome to do that. But I'll go down the list real quickly. Nick Balkin, he is the bass player for Kingsley Flood. He grew up in New York, went to Ithaca, moved to Boston in 2001, and now is playing musically in the local scene from about 2005 to present. Sound about right? Next we have Chris. Chris is done everything from 90s indie rock guitar bands to big bands, and he plays trumpet, keys, and percussion, and everything else in Kingsley Flood. And then we also have Janae. She plays violin, saxophone, background vocals, doing everything in Kingsley Flood, and she helps with her opinion and advice as much as possible if people want to hear it. Annie Hoffman, she's in the other band called The Field Effect. She's a bassist, and she's also a Berkeley alum, and she's also a staff engineer at Zippa Records in Brighton. And Doug Ori, he's the lead singer, rhythm guitarist in The Field Effect. He's also a songwriter, and he's also a Berkeley alum as well. Doug does want you to know that he also has a beard. So, just want to clarify.
You do?
So,
Yes. Oh, I never noticed that before.
Yeah.
cool.
I like-
So as you can kind of tell,
That's
these guys are really open. They're easy to talk to. So I want to kind of give you some context of where they are currently, and then we'll kind of go backwards a little bit in time and see how they got to this place, and see some of the tools that they use, some of the resources that they got to where they are, and what they're doing currently. So if one representative, or if you guys want to kind of chime in together, give a little bit of context about the band currently. What kind of venues are you playing in Boston? How many Facebook likes do you have? Do you have a website? Do you have an agent, a manager? Can you give me like a quick 30, 60-second pitch about your band at this point?
Yeah, so right now we just got back from South by Southwest. It's our second trip down to Austin. Most recently in Boston, we played at the Paradise Rock Club with Bad Rabbits and Clifflight for the Do 617 launch party. We make the rounds. We got a show coming up at Great Scott. We've been kind of steadily building up our social media presence, close to 1,600 likes, I guess, on Facebook, and almost 800 followers on Yield Twitter. We're working on a new record, our second record, and pretty excited about it. That's kind of where we're at now.
So how long have you guys been around? Is Boston where you guys started?
Yeah.
And how long have you guys been doing it so far?
I think we're about to turn 3, or we just turned 3. So not too terribly long, but
Yeah, 3 sounds right.
All right. What about from you guys?
Should I go? All right. So, wow, so open-ended. So we started, I think, 5 years ago. There's been a lot of lineup changes, but I was one of the first people. The singer of the band knows everything, and he's not here, so we're just going to do our best. we started playing, and then we went through like a almost complete lineup change where Chris and Janae joined, and then things sort of started to really come together after that. Our last show
4 years ago too. So.
4 years ago, yeah. So our last show was at Paradise. It was the Hot Stove Cool Music show, which is a big fundraiser thrown by Theo Epstein and Peter Gammons, who are like, you know, sort of Red Sox affiliated people. And what else was part of that question?
What kind of venues are you guys playing currently? And
So yeah, Paradise in Boston. We play DC a lot. Play New York. Usually try to play Boston, New York, and DC twice a year each. We've been playing Philly a lot more, and then we hit some smaller markets in the Northeast, like Northampton and Portland. And occasionally we'll get out to the Midwest and do Chicago and Madison and Minneapolis. But have not hit the West Coast yet. That's probably sometime next year we'll try to do that.
Where are you based?
We're here
In Boston.
in
We're lead
Boston.
singers in DC, so go back and forth between the two.
Yeah, it's kind of a weird situation.
Yeah.
cool. So yeah, and then we have a kind of a good context of where they're coming from currently. I'd like to kind of get a little bit of sense of, you know, what are those growing pains that first started out, maybe that first year of the band, or maybe was there any kind of big break that helped you kind of get over the hump of just playing, you know, local bars or gigs or however. So can you guys maybe talk about that first year of the band, of how things kind of came together?
Well, I remember one of the first kind of like heartbreaking things for us. We drove up to Gloucester. Our drummer's from Gloucester, and one of his friends' bands was playing a show at this place called Dog Bar, I believe. And the place was kind of like filled out for the other band was doing 2 sets, and we were playing in between. And there were a bunch of people there, and they finished their first set, and everybody went outside. And then we played for like 5 or 6 people, and then after we played, everybody came back inside, and the place was packed again. It was just like, cool, that was fun.
But there were a lot of those sorts of shows are important. You know, you cut your teeth, you develop your dynamic and your energy and chemistry on stage. So you have to expect to play
For
some
like
of like
no
the,
one
you know,
sometimes. And you know, they were like,
crappy shows.
the 6 people that were there kind of dug it, so that felt good. But I think one of like our big breaks that kind of happened in the first year was we were asked to open for the Sheila Divine at the Paradise Rock Club, and that put us in front of a lot of people that had never heard of us, and it kind of really kickstarted everything for us from then on out. After that.
Oh, sorry
Yeah.
to interrupt. Sorry. There were a lot of people at that show who were really involved in the scene here in Boston that we've become such a big part of, and so that was the first time we were showcased within this scene. There were some radio folks there, some press folks there, and there was a series of like aftershocks from that show alone, where our name was popping up on the radio. We got some airplay. Our name popped up in local magazines. So, yeah, that was.
Yeah, that was
big.
kind of the launching part. We met some people. Richard Bouchard was running a blog called Boston Band Crush at the time, and he was kind of one of the first people to start writing about us, and he eventually introduced us to Michael Murata, who was working for WFNX in the Phoenix, and he kind of took us under his wing from there. When FNX went to an online station, put us in regular rotation, started writing about us a bunch in the Phoenix, and it just everything kind of steadily grew from there, and I can trace all of that pretty much back to that one opportunity opening for a band at the Paradise.
So I'd like to jump back a little bit. How did you guys get that gig? What's the story that kind of got you to that point? I think that's what I think for a lot of young artists that I counsel here at the college of, they're doing the gigs, they're doing the bar scenes, they're doing house parties, those type of things. But to get one of those opening acts, can you share a little bit about that process?
My day job, I work in a recording studio in Brighton, right down the street, really. And my boss was a producer for the band that we opened for, the Sheila Divine. He was their producer for a long time, and he actually plays with them live just because they were a trio. So he just like fills in extra guitar work and stuff like that. And so because I work at the studio, I get dibs on free days. If there's a holiday and nobody wants to book it, I can bring projects in that I want to work on just in my spare time. And so he heard a little bit of what we were working on, and he was digging it, and came to see us and brought another member of that band,
Jim Gilbert.
Jim Gilbert. He's the bass player, and Jim has since become one of our biggest mentors. And they liked it enough, and they had a release party coming up for a reunion record, and they both agreed that would be a great opener. So that's
Very
where it
cool.
came from.
And Jim came to see us the first time at the Red Room at
Oh, yeah.
939.
Yeah, so what was your first gig for you guys?
I think the very first one, we got to play 3 songs at TT the Bear's place.
Yeah, it was a compilation release party. So like 25 bands played, I think.
And yeah, we got 15 minutes, and we played 3 songs, one of which we had written like earlier that week. And I think some people dug it, so that was cool.
Cool. And so for Kingsley Flood, what about for you guys in that first year of initial forming? I know you guys weren't all there for the initial part, but maybe the first couple of years of, making that transition from, doing regular gigs to building an audience. What kind of things stand out? Maybe a break or 2, or maybe a failure or 2 would be good to hear.
Well, we had someone give us really good advice early on, which was to not shoot too high, like play rooms that are the right size for you. So we always went for rooms that were too small at first, and we tried to always sell out every show, because there's nothing worse than playing to an empty room, even if it's a small room especially. So we tried to keep building up really slowly and play less and less frequently the more people we were getting to the shows, and not kind of burn them out. I think that was really helpful early on.
So actually doing less shows is what you're saying, right? Less shows per year to...
Yeah, as we started getting more people, we started playing less and less.
Yeah.
I think that's something a mistake I made in previous bands where Chris and I were in a previous band. I think like you get a lot of people to your first show because all your friends and family are excited to hear you. And then after that, I mean, it is really hard to build a following somewhere like Boston. I mean, it's hard to build a following anywhere, but there's just fewer people go out to shows these days. I really think that's true. And you have to be really, really strategic about the kind of shows you play. I mean, opening for someone like Sheila Divine or any kind of national touring act is definitely, if you can get those gigs, that's a really good place to start, because then you're going to be playing for people who are seeking out live music instead of just people that you're bringing to the show. So I guess my big advice in terms of playing early is try to sell out small venues and then try to get opening gigs for the bigger national shows.
But that first year, you think you guys played a lot of shows. It's good, I think, initially to play shows to get your name out there. 'Cause I know that you and I were still in another band when Kingsley formed. I remember seeing you guys at Sally's, and they were still a trio. And this place, Sally O'Brien's in Somerville, and it was when the Celtics were in the finals for the NBA championship. And everyone's watching the game, and then you guys finished a song, and everyone started cheering, and you were psyched, and you looked up, and everyone was looking away from you, including me. We're all watching the team, like, oh yeah, you guys too. Huh?
I'm glad you brought that up, because that was going to be my example of like a tough gig.
Yeah.
Or we played a gig in Providence a few years ago, and we
Oh,
don't
yeah.
have a following in Providence at all. It was on a Sunday. It was the first day of football season, and the Pats are playing at home. We literally had one person show up, and we had told them beforehand, like, we don't have a following here, so we really don't have many people to bring. And they're like, oh no, it's cool. And of course, nobody came because they were all watching football. But it turned out to be a really great gig for us because we just said whatever, and we had just recorded an album and we had never played it live, so we just decided to play it from front to back, and it was really fun. But you make the most of those situations.
Mhm.
My first gig with the band was at the Dog Bar in Gloucester.
Oh, awesome.
No way.
Yeah.
Actually, yeah, that's a
Yeah.
good point. Actually, yeah, another thing is just to, it's good to play these bad shows sometimes because you never know where they might lead. I remember this one specific gig where we played for a wedding, and the money was good, but it was like they wanted just to play outside, just 3 of us. Were you up there?
Yeah, it was you, me, and the
Yeah,
singer.
just me and Chris and the singer, and nobody really paid attention, but it was like $500, and we had another
Standing in
gig
the
earlier
grass,
that day.
there's no amps.
And it was
No
kind of a bummer,
lights.
it was just seemed kind of like a bummer, but it was good money. And then so we played it, and then the guy that was doing sound, who was just like a friend of the groom, came up to us. He was like, "Oh, that was really cool. I know some people over in Northampton, and that's a place we don't know anybody. So he was like, I can help you guys get a gig at the Iron Horse." So he got us a gig at the Iron Horse like a year later. And then at that gig, there was a guy from Rolling Stone there. And he was like one of 3 people in the audience. And he then like wrote about us like 6 months after that. So it was like 2 gigs that didn't look like they were going to be that good. And they both led to something. They kept leading to something better. So
I know we did a gig at Ralph's Rock Diner in Worcester.
Oh, yeah.
And I don't think we've ever done a really great show at Ralph's. And this one, there were more people than normal, so probably about 17. And but there was a guy in there who had came up to me after the show and was just like, I came to check out the first band that played, and then I saw you guys, and you're just fantastic. And I organized this thing in New Bedford, and I think you guys would be a great fit for it. And I'd love to email you more details. He's like, it's called the Feast of the Blessed Sacrament. And I was just like, okay, this just sounds kind of weird, but yeah, send us an email. And so we looked up this festival online and just saw like a sea of people. And he came to another one of our shows a couple months later at Great Scott, and was just like, yeah, I'm sold. Like, I want to offer you guys this spot. Said I can pay you this much, and it was the most ridiculous gig that we've ever played. We got our own trailer with a mini fridge full of beer, and then went outside and played for over 10,000 people. And it was just like the most surreal thing ever, and it all started at a poorly attended gig in Worcester.
We weren't even supposed to play that show.
We weren't even
Somebody
supposed to.
dropped
Yeah,
off the bill, and we were
filled
doing
in
a
last
favor.
minute.
Yeah.
To help out our friends, the Rationales, and it ended up turning into that. So I mean, like, yeah, I mean, anything can come from even the crappiest of gigs, for sure.
Yeah.
So I feel like a lot of these opportunities, like, they seem random and they come up from random connections or random people, but ultimately there is some kind of thought process or tools or things that you guys have together, because you're obviously growing and you're building an audience and doing these type of things. So can we maybe talk a little bit about maybe the tools that you had, or maybe you had a manager or an agent, or we can kind of go in any kind of direction you guys want to kind of go with this, but there is definitely serendipity with booking gigs and growing a career and being in the right place at the right time, but it's also having the right tools. So do you guys want to kind of take that however?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest things for us first starting out especially was just not necessarily even playing the shows, but actually just going to shows and meeting other bands and just showing support for that local music community, and just kind of hanging out and meeting people, and in general just being a nice person goes a long way. You meet somebody that could really help you out, but they know that they can help you out too, and everybody else knows that they can help them out. And so you get a lot of people that'll go up to like somebody who writes for a magazine or whatever and just immediately be like, oh, check out my band, like, you should write about us. Wrong way to go. Just be a normal person, and get to know if they have like a cat or something first. And,
Yeah, I'd like to talk about this a little bit more, maybe from all of you guys, of like,
yeah.
how do you, like, I know I was going to ask you a little bit more about with the record, the record studio that you're at. How do you talk about your own project without sounding annoying or being intrusive or overselling yourself, but also, being an advocate for yourself and saying, I do have this band, I do have this music. So any thoughts about, kind of promoting yourself in conversation with people you don't know?
When you're out, when you go to a show, you're surrounded by a lot of other musicians and a lot of music enthusiasts in general, because who goes to a show, they hate music. So I think it just comes up naturally, just, talking about one thing, and you're like, oh, that reminds me of the time we played that crappy show at Dog Bar, and then you're like, oh, you played too. Your face becomes associated with your band name just naturally. You don't have to shove it down someone's throat.
It's kind of like going to a party or any sort of social mixer with people. You don't want to talk about yourself constantly. You want to engage someone else and let it more naturally lead to talking about what you're into. And if they're in another band, be interested in that band. It's kind of like there's like that unwritten rule, especially when you're playing local shows. Don't load out while the other band's playing. Try to stay for the whole set, but definitely don't load out while they're playing. Show them the respect you want them to show you, and it sort of happens through the whole spectrum of all that. Like the poor shows we've talked about where no one shows up. You show up and don't bitch about it, and don't look sullen on stage, because you don't know who's going to be in there. You just have to sort of be gracious about it, because ultimately, hopefully you're doing this because you love to play music. It's great to have a career and stuff with it too, but if you like the music, then sometimes it's hard to remember that, but it does make a difference.
Yeah, and promoters will remember, oh, they were in here on a tough night, but they were good sports, they put on a good show
Right.
nonetheless. That people remember stuff like that, and it's good.
Yeah, there's going to be a lot of bad shows. That's
Yeah.
I think like you shouldn't get down on like having a couple bad shows. That's the thing. It's like I said, it's really hard to make that jump from like a local band to a national band. I mean, because we're sort of trying to do that now, and it's really hard. I mean, like, but yeah, like there are good things that come from those shows. So be smart about which ones you take, and then try to make the most of each one.
And definitely go and just hang out in the back of the room and talk to the fans or whoever just is hanging out. You know, don't just sit there and look sullen, as Chris said. Be a nice person.
Unless that's your personal brand.
Right. I mean, unless you're like, yeah, I'm cool. Oh yeah, you know, and then people are might think you're cool and they might think you're a dick, but one way or the other, they're gonna remember you.
But yeah, there's nothing worse than when someone comes up and they're really aggressively trying to sell themselves to you. It's
Yeah.
like, and just think about, you know, if you're doing that to someone else, think about what it's like from their point of view. You know, just be a normal person, as you said. I think that's the best way to sell yourself.
I want to stay on this topic of networking a little bit more. Any questions from the audience about networking or promoting yourself or making connections? Any thoughts or concerns from the audience? Anybody? So who's a performer here? Who's your performer? Who's booking their own bands now? Anybody here booking your own stuff? Not really? So who's booking your music? Who's booking your band? Who's getting you gigs? Just you? So what questions might you guys have for these guys who are maybe 3 or 4 steps ahead of you?
I've got a question. Although it's important to, recognize that the world is changing, some people have the opinion that some places just do or don't have a music scene. And maybe Boston does have a music scene, but for Berkeley students who might not feel encouraged or inspired to go and play at home, how might they approach either developing where they are or knowing where to go?
Good. So just to kind of repeat the question of just starting into a new market, right? Kind of establishing yourself. So as you guys are, in your current state, how did you get from, step 1 to step 2 of like going into a new market, building new fans, doing that type of stuff? What was your approach in doing that?
I would say, like, for Philadelphia as an example, we had a really hard time getting into Philadelphia, and we ended up playing a house show, and we met a few people there who really liked us, and we just connected with them. So you make those people your #1 fans in that city, and you keep in contact with them, and you work really hard with them to try the next time you go there to bring their friends.
Does everybody know what a house show is?
Yeah, actually, that's a really good point. I'm glad you brought that up because we had played like 4 club shows in Philadelphia that were just the worst shows. It was just like, because we don't know anybody in Philadelphia between the 6 of us, so we'd just take whatever we could get there and we go down. We'd even do trades. Like we'd bring some band to Boston, we'd put them in front of a couple hundred people, and then we'd go down and we'd play it for like 2 people. And we were like, oh, it was so hard to find a local band that could draw there. So, and there was one gig where it was like these 2 like new metal bands. It was nothing like what we were doing. But the house shows was the turning point because we played like 4 house shows in a row, and the people that you want to find the people that are seeking out live music and the kind of music that you play. And you can't make people at the bar where the TV's on, it's really hard to turn those people into fans. No matter how good you are, they're not there for the music a lot of the time, or they're there to support their friend's band. These house shows, it seems they really foster a community of people that want to support this music. Like, we'll make more money at these house shows than some of like the bigger club shows, like where we actually draw a lot of people, and we'll play in front of like 30 strangers and make more money from donations a lot of the time.
They'll sit and be quiet and listen the whole time, too.
And they'll sit and listen the whole time, and it's amazing. And in Philadelphia, in DC also, we've built our fan base through these house shows. And also, they don't really conflict with, sometimes clubs are like, well, you can't play within 3 weeks or how many days. The house shows are treated totally separately, and it's great because in Philadelphia, we've now transitioned back to the clubs again, and the people from the house shows are now coming to the clubs. So, I mean, there's not like a magic bullet for this stuff because playing a new market is really, really discouraging at first. There's been some really tough, especially when you drive really far to get there and there's nobody there and you're just like, well, what am I doing this for? So yeah, you just have to house shows.
So how do you set up those house shows? Is it a random connection, or
I think
finding people? Or is there a website, or is there?
Some of them is random connection. There is, I can't think of the name of them. There's an organization that does house shows in various cities.
So far?
Yeah, so far.
That was- yeah.
That was it.
That was
That
the one
was
we
the
did in
one.
Philly, yeah. And they've
That was
won
the show,
Chicago.
actually,
Yeah.
where we met all those people.
Yeah.
And there were, I think 4 or 5 other bands or solo artists that played that night. So it wasn't just us. I think we were the featured artists, so we got 30 minutes, whereas the rest of them each got 10 minutes. But it was a nice, relaxing party, and everyone just got to chat afterwards, and you made lots of friends. And a lot of these people come to our shows now. Now, if you're doing basement shows, the people aren't going to necessarily just sit there and be quiet and clap afterwards. But find what works for you and your music. I'd
But
say.
basement shows are probably still preferable to club shows early on.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Because then at least you're connecting with people face to face, and they're not, you're not competing with the TV.
Though it's good to be adaptable too. That first Philly show, our drummer was flipping out like, I can't play quietly. I'm not using hot rods. I'm not using brushes. What am I going to do? And he got really grouchy right before the show. And the show was fine, and people were into it. And he was like, all right, that was good. I'm sorry I was being a pain. So if you can deal with those situations and deal with the different environments, it not only makes you a better band and a better musician, but it helps endear you to the crowd and can win you people in places you didn't expect you could do it.
What about for you guys in the field effect, going into a new market? What kind of things do you think about?
I think one big thing that we're branching out more and more from Boston. We played Portland recently, and we're going back to Portland again coming up soon. And a lot of those shows have started out from meeting people and playing with other bands from those areas. So I think that's important, and we're also looking at doing more shows where we also know we've got like friends and family and stuff, just so we can kind of break into those new rooms and actually show that we can bring a few people out to a show, and in hopes that they might drag a few people out. And you always hope to build up with some strong locals. We played at Trash Bar in New York recently, and it was a 5-band bill, and the 2 bands from Boston outdrew the locals, which was a little frustrating, but at the same time it was like, cool, we're from out of town and we outdrew the locals. But you also hope that the locals in that city will pull out. And it's important when you're kind of designing those bills, you kind of want to be sandwiched between those locals, because you do want to get in front of their fans, hoping that they have some. And I think that's important, and just kind of starting to do it more frequently, and hope that reaching out to like some blogs for some coverage and press and stuff can be a little helpful. But it's definitely, it took us a while to break into being able to book shows in New York. I know I sent dozens and dozens of emails before we ever got our first show in New York that just went like completely unanswered, and those can be really frustrating. And then eventually one person is just like, yeah, okay, cool, we've got this slot, and you're like, okay, well, it's Wednesday night in New York, gonna call in sick for work and make this happen, and go for it. And going back to the just put on a good show even if there's nobody there, because you don't know who's there. And 2, promoters talk, they all talk, and if they talk to some other clubs in the area and say, yeah, we had this band in from Boston recently, the draw wasn't solid, but they've got good tunes, they had a lot of energy, and they were just nice people, and they were on time, they didn't trash things and bitch about every little thing. They talk, and if you do whine and complain about everything, then they send around those email chains. It's like, hey, don't book this band, they're a bunch of mean people.
Yeah, that's a good point. A lot of these shows, they start out like when it's empty, like you never know who's going to be there. And I think a lot of bands for a long time, they play to very small crowds, and then suddenly everything aligns because enough of the right people have started talking about you, promoters, the press people, managers and agents and stuff like that. And I think everything has to align. And then you can make like a really big jump. Like there's this band we did a couple shows with last year called Lucius, and they They went to Berkeley a long time ago, and they've really caught fire over the last year. But they've been around for, I think, almost 8 years now, but they're like the best new band, you know. It takes a really long
Well, it's
time
like
to make
Lake
that
Street
jump.
Dive is another example.
Lake Street Dive is another one, yeah. They've been around way longer than we have.
Like 10 years or something like that.
Yeah, and it takes a long time to be the cool new band because it doesn't, you know, it's like, I remember Lucius, like 2 years ago, they were on Facebook being like, vote for us on the deli, you know, and now they're like, they were on Conan last night. So you can kind of toil away in obscurity for a really long time, but if you make enough, if enough of the right people see you and you continue to get better, things can happen, I think. Because it is really hard to sort of just it's really hard to go to a new market, just suddenly fill rooms unless you have like important people talking about you, I think. I just don't.
And as
Yeah.
tempting as it might be, don't lie about your draw to those new rooms, because like Doug
That's
was saying,
huge.
the promoters talk to each other, and if they can't, they're trying to fill a room, they're trying to run a business, and if you tell them, yeah, I can bring 50 people, and you bring 2 people in, you know, it's going to be looked. If they expect you to bring 2 people in and they booked you on that, then okay, that's cool. It's an investment in growing your presence in this town. But if you say you can bring 50 people and you bring in 2, they're like, you just fucked me over out of X amount of money, and I got to pay my bar staff and my bouncer and this and that. They're not going to want to work with you.
It feels weird typing that in an email too. Like you want so badly to be like, oh yeah, we can bring 100 people. And like that New York show that we did recently, they wanted to know what we could draw, and I think I said 25 to 30 people, and they did a door count, and we brought 27 people. So it was just like spot on. Like they were happy, and they want to have us back. They also had a crazy regular that got really messed up and pretended to be the manager, so that was fun.
That's a really good point, though. Be honest. I actually sometimes will shoot lower just so we can surprise them and
Yeah.
exceed expectations. But yeah, it's like, especially when I'm trying to find like opening bands for our shows in Boston and DC. It's like it's really hard because I know everybody's lying. You know, I'm like, I've been to your shows. I know, like, I mean, if you told me 20 people will come, that's all I want. But when someone tells me it's like 100 and I know it's not going to be 100, that just turns me off. I don't want to, work with you if you're going to lie to me. But yeah, people appreciate it when you're honest. And I think a lot of like promoters, they look at bands as an investment. They're like, I like this band. I want to find fans for you. But they're not going to want to do that if you're dishonest to them right off the bat.
So kind of going along the lines of being an investment for the promoter or venue or whatever, what kind of things are you guys doing to kind of engage your audience or engage the conversation of you guys going? Are you active on social media? Are you releasing a lot of music? Are you doing other things outside of the music realm of collaboration with artists or products or whatever? What kind of things are you doing to keep those conversations going? Because like you said, you're maybe doing 2 shows a year in Boston, but maybe you're releasing a lot of music. So can you guys talk a little bit about that, of what you guys do to keep those conversations going, to help build that career, build that audience when you're not always playing gigs?
Yeah, I mean, I always like social media stuff. People like seeing stuff that we're doing. Especially Instagram in recent years has been a really cool thing, and you connect it with all your other social channels so people see it all over the place. Like, posted a picture of us landing in the Austin airport, and it reached like 2,000 people. Like, Annie's mom said it had wonderful composition, but I don't think it reached that many people because the photo had that great composition. But I mean, just staying connected. When somebody mentions you on Twitter, I use TweetDeck, and I've got it open, and it's got a custom search field. So anytime anything related to the field effect comes up that isn't necessarily tagged to us, but maybe it's just plain text, it'll find it. I get a lot of stuff about sports and transistors, but on occasion, I also get a bunch of tweets that I wouldn't have seen otherwise if I didn't have this search set up, and then in turn, you can retweet it. It might be a cool article that you didn't know somebody wrote about you, blog post, whatever, and it's kind of like one of those, you scratch my back, I'll scratch yours, so you retweet it and maybe follow that person, and then they're like, cool, you're a nice person. I keep coming back to this, just be nice, like engage with people, like interact with them, and because a lot of writers and stuff, like they're running their own blogs, and they like getting the hits, and they'll write about you more if they know that you're actually going to share it and tell your friends and fans that like, hey, this is a blog that does cool stuff and writes about cool music. I mean, they're writing about us, right? So
And if you have a lot of stuff, like if a number of articles come out about you, you shouldn't post them all at once on Facebook, because spread it out a little bit. You'll get more mileage out of it. Because say you have five articles came out on you and you post them all at once, then like for the next 2 weeks you're just like, the field effect is thinking about eating something, you know.
Well, no one's gonna read.
No one's
those
gonna-
5
yeah,
articles.
right.
And-
All at once.
You got a
binge
question right
reading.
here?
Yeah. So now, I mean, this is all very recent, but one thing I noticed is like with Facebook specifically,
Mhm.
the layout and the way they've sort of set up the way pages are viewed
Mhm.
is now totally different. And now you don't see pages or posts from pages appear in the direct feed without paying for advertising. And I don't know if that, I don't know if you, I mean, this is all very recent, but I'm wondering if you guys have navigated that at all yet.
We have a few tricks for maximizing Facebook reach because we don't like to pay the. Plus, it looks really lame when it comes up and says sponsored.
Yeah.
So what we found works pretty well is we only post one thing a day, no more than that. Everybody in the band shares it from that page, so it reaches everybody in their network, and the number jumps up. And if it's a picture, we'll wait until the next day to tag everybody in it, so it comes up in everyone's feed again, and you get exponential reach.
And, I
Like,
mean, it is still reaching some people's news feeds because people can like subscribe to your updates and everything. There's not as much organic traffic. There's a lot of timing stuff that's really important. I find posting things between like 10 a.m. and 11 a.m. usually works really well because everybody's been at work for an hour or two and they're like, well, I'm bored, so I'm going to cruise Facebook now, and that usually helps kind of like reach more and more people. But yeah, it is kind of shitty the way Facebook kind of is like, oh, well, if you want people to see your stuff, you need to give us money, and that sucks. But Twitter and Instagram are great for that. I mean, it's a little bit of a different way to digest content, but it's still a viable option for sure.
I think just to jump in a little bit about Facebook, if you do have a page, use the insights. You're going to see what your demographics are. So if you have male or female, customize your message based on that type of stuff. They even show you the arc of when your followers are reading your messages. So, finding the time that works for those things. So I think this is the biggest thing for up and coming bands is like, who is my audience? Maybe you don't know who they are. So you have to find those keywords, maybe the other places besides music that they're finding their information or what they're into. And so using those analytics will help you kind of think, okay, I'm going to do it this time, use these words, tag these companies, post, to these people. So being conscious about those things, I think, help.
I have a question about the blogs. How was like the first blogs that started like cover about you? Were you like ongoing people that you know? And what was the breaking point that like blogs which like you had no connections to started writing about you, and like why? Like what was the switch from like being undercovered in the web to by other like these blogs, and then to like switching to the point that like people start writing about you and you don't know them.
So just kind of talking about how do you get blogs to cover you at first when nobody knows who you are?
You're not known, and like what's the breaking point?
Yeah, so how do you break the blog
Well, I think
syndicate?
one thing, a lot of blog people are, working just as hard as the bands are, and they want stuff to write about. So there are a lot of blogs that you can actually submit your stuff to and just, hope that maybe they like the song that you sent them and they'll write about it.
Or you can invite them to see a show. Give them at least like 2 weeks notice and just say, hey, I'll put you on the guest list. If you want to come check out the band, and these are the other bands on the bill you might know and like them.
Yeah, we did that with a lot of kind of the more established blogs already early on, was just kind of sending out those emails and being like, hey, we'd love to have you come to the show. Didn't ask them to like write anything or cover the show at all. It was more just like, hey, we'd love to have you at this show as our guest, like let us know if you want to come out. And we did that, I think, with like Alston Pudding. We did it with Boston Band Crush when it was still a thing. Just inviting those people out. A lot of them, like I said, they want to know what's going on, and if they don't know about your show, then they're never going to come. And then you do meet them in person and kind of develop that relationship, and more stuff comes along from there.
If it's like a local blog or a blog in an area you're playing a show, you can invite them to sponsor the show with you, even though they're not doing anything essentially except associating their name with the show, the blog, and maybe promoting it in the blog. And that's a way they can sort of feel more involved and they're getting something out of it too. And you know, hopefully you like the blogger, and hopefully they like the band they're promoting. But it's another way to sort of tie things in. Because the thing to remember is, you know, you want people to listen to your music, but you want to give them a reason to want to help you, or to make it something that it's mutually beneficial. You know, no one likes, and we all know these people. No one likes no matter how good a musician they are or how good their songs are, the guy that's all me, and not enough about me. What do you think of my songs? You know, no one wants to deal with that stuff. So you have to keep that in mind. And sometimes it's, you know, even when you're thinking about it, sometimes you kind of forget that. But it's a good way to do that sort of stuff.
And if you have guest spots, use them wisely. You know, if you have some bloggers or someone from a local paper who wants to come to your show and you have a guest spot, give it to them. And they're
Give them a +1.
Yes, and
Yeah.
even better, give them a +1.
We've if we run out of guest spots and we want people there that are going to do something, we buy tickets to our own shows for those specific reasons. Like, you know, my parents are coming up to come to our show on the 3rd, and I'm not putting them on the guest list, but I'm buying their tickets. You know, saving those guest list spots for the people. You know, I love my parents. I'll take care of them, but you know. My mom's blog is not worth. My mom's blog. She doesn't have a blog, but you know. But like, you know, don't be afraid to shell out like the $7 to the door guy and say, hey, put this name on the list. It's covered. We've done that for a number of shows when we run out of guest spots, because sometimes you only get like 2. It depends on the venue. So you know, you definitely want people there, and you don't want them to have to, you know, spend their own money to come to a show to write about you. So
We actually have a Google Doc we share that says this show's coming up. These are the guest spots we're using for this press or this person. If there's something open, sure, your girlfriend or your mom can come, but if, you know, you might have to pay for it. And so we have a good idea before each show. There's a spot open, there's no spots open, so.
we have a really disorganized group text. So 2 sides of that.
I'd also say for bloggers, like, make sure your content is good on your website, so when they're checking you out, they have a good idea. Like Doug was saying, like, they want content, and so sometimes you may have to come up with a story for them and kind of like already have that, like almost do their job for them. And so then they have an easier job to say, okay, cool, this makes sense, I can make this work. So getting that stuff together will help them in the long
If you have a good, well-written press release, you'll often find it taken verbatim in a story about you.
Yeah, they'll copy and paste.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I would
A lot of
actually,
stuff.
instead of not even a press release, just have a good bio and hire someone else to write the bio. Don't write it yourself, because that's something we did, and it was so much better, because writing about yourself is just so awkward. And when you give someone else the album, you're like, what would you write? You know, I had a friend who was a journalist, and I was just like, you know, listen to it and then write what you think it sounds like, because that's a more accurate reflection of what it actually sounds like, the way you think it sounds like. You know,
Yeah, I
our
mean-
singer's always saying we sound like Stax Records stuff, and I'm like, we
We're
don't
like-
sound anything like
yeah.
that. Stop saying that. You're just going to piss everyone off if people hear you say that.
I would say for you guys that are Berkeley students, there's a Pro Arts Connect, and so Berkeley's part of these different schools, and so Emerson, for example, all those students over there are, you know, in marketing and writing and stuff like that. So make some of those connections. So if you don't have the money right now to pay for somebody to write this stuff, make some of those connections and see they need to do stuff.
Even if it's just your friend, you can pay
Yeah.
$50. Yeah, it's better than writing it yourself. I mean, like, you can take it and shape it and take little parts of it and cut and paste. But I think, like, if you want to get like a more accurate, you know, if you're just trying to describe your own music, I think it's sometimes better to get someone else to do it at least first, to give you an idea of what it sounds like to someone who's more objective.
Nobody wants to read another bio about how this guy came from Planet Funk and they don't sound like anybody. And they sound like
No
everything
food
you've ever heard.
analogies. Just don't ever do a food analogy.
I think taking advantage of that pro arts thing is an awesome thing to do, because we just filmed a thing at Emerson for a bunch of students, and I mean, it's a free, high quality live video for us now that we're going to be able to use kind of however we want. And really, it was kind of like their class, like that's what they were supposed to do, you know. You know, don't hesitate to take advantage of those opportunities and stuff. Don't think like, oh, it's just a bunch of college kids playing with cameras. I mean, like, that was one of the nicest studios I've ever been in.
Yeah.
They had, I mean, they were all freaking out because it was like super stressful for them. It was adorable, but like,
One thing that's great about you guys as bands is everybody's involved, and so I'd like you guys at least try to take this away that, you know, building your career and building your audience isn't your solo job. Like, you're not one person doing all this type of stuff. You have to kind of delegate and give different jobs of your band to different people and kind of share that responsibility. So I kind of like to talk about maybe other people part of your team. So do you guys have an agent? Do you have a manager? Yes, no. Maybe you got rid of somebody. Maybe you can hear a story about that. Or when did you feel like you were ready? You know, I know when I was a booking agent and manager, we wouldn't sign anybody unless they had a touring history, unless they had a record label, unless they had a certain amount of followers, because it wasn't worth, like we talked about before, the investment part of it. So nobody's going to invest in you unless they know they're going to get a return on their investment. So let's talk a little bit about team. You know, what people are beyond. Maybe you want to talk about people in your band that do those roles, people beyond the band. However you guys want to approach it.
I think early on for us, I think every band has to do everything themselves first. I mean, unless you're like independently wealthy and really connected or something. But we did everything by ourselves. I did almost all the booking for the first 2 years, and that was terrible. But one of our top priorities was always to get an agent and a manager, and it took a really long time. Mainly, I think, because a tough thing about being a band in Boston is it's not really a music center. You know, there's not much music industry here. So I always tell people from Boston, like, get outside Boston as much as you can, because you can only go so far here, because there's not that many agents or managers living in Boston. And it took us a long time to find. We actually got an agent first. And that came, it was one of those things where people told me early on, like, don't be too aggressive trying to court an agent manager. They have to come to you and all this stuff. And I think I took that a little too literally, and we were like almost not aggressive enough, I think. But what happened was the guy who's now our manager, like 5 years ago, we like sent him an email. And like once a year we would send him an email. And then one day he was just like, oh, I'm coming to your next show. And now he's our manager. And it was just, it just takes a long time. You don't want to be too aggressive about it. But I mean, yeah, we started working with an agent last January, and it really, really helped move things along faster when you're not booking things yourself, because of the credibility associated with an agent. When you're booking your own shows, I think that you can only get so far, and then people start to wonder why you don't have an agent. So I think once we had one, like suddenly I remember like the next week we had like 10 shows that were just like on the calendar, and it was all support shows. And they were great shows. And instead of spending like 3 months trying to set up a show that may or may not be totally horrible, we had like 10 shows immediately that were really good. But at the same time, like, having an agent's not a magic bullet either. It's like you still have to work with them. We still don't have draw in a lot of markets, most markets. So it's not like they can suddenly like make fans appear at your shows, but they can get you on bills where there are fans to convert, hopefully. And you're not just kind of shooting in the dark, So it was good, but I think if I could go back, I would be a little bit more aggressive about finding agents in New York and trying to get them to our shows in New York. Pretty much everyone we talked to were locally based, and there's just not that many people. And the people we're working with now are locally based. But I think that maybe we should have tried a little harder to find people in New York, or just to make things happen sooner.
I can't really speak to the topic of agencies yet. We recently hired a manager. Well, we're still in the trial period, so she's on trial at the moment. But
and he. There's two of them.
Oh yeah,
it's a team.
They're a duo. But what I can speak to, kind of along the same lines, if you happen to find yourself in a mentorship situation, like we have a couple older musicians in town that have kind of taken us under their wing, and they're well connected, just like the agent, so you can use them to your advantage. If they see the calendar for the Paradise and they see that a band is coming through and there's no listed opener, they might be like, hey, I know so-and-so over at Live Nation. I think you guys would be a good fit for this.
That's how we opened for the Promise Ring at the Paradise, and it was like one of the coolest shows. So we were all huge fans and just kind of in awe of it. And I was out with Jim Gilbert from the Sheila Divine one night having drinks, and he was just like, hey, this band's coming through town. I think you'd be a great fit. Like, they're called the Promise Ring. And I was just like, wait, what? And I didn't think anything of it. And then a couple months later, he was just like, oh, hey, so I emailed so-and-so at Live Nation. Can't promise anything yet, but it looks good. And then a couple weeks after that, we got the like advanced like show confirmation, all the details and everything, and it was just, it was something that we couldn't do on our own, but we let somebody that we knew and trusted kind of handle that for us, and that's happened a few times.
Yeah.
You know, and I think early on, all of us, and still we do a lot of our own booking, with the exception of a few things like that, where we can kind of leverage those particular connections. And I think one important thing is like, all of us kind of do like the emails and responding to things, be it, you know, saying yes or saying no, but we all know what's going to be said before we send it. So, you know, we'll send around a group message that says, hey, you know, we're shooting down this is what I'm writing to say, you know, that way if anybody asks why, like they fire back like, whoa, why can't you do it? You don't end up having somebody else respond and being like, oh, well, you know, Annie's going to her mom's house that weekend, and then Adam writes back, oh, I'm walking my dog that weekend, you know. So it's good to be on the same page as everybody, and you know, that I think communication within the band is pretty key and pretty important with all that stuff. But yeah, I mean, like we just kind of started working with a manager, and you know, she brought an agent to one of our shows at South by Southwest, and you know, they might be interested in working with us. And it's all kind of weird right now because we're really used to doing everything ourselves, so it's really kind of it's scary to give somebody else like the keys and say like, yeah, here, take over my career. Like, I totally trust you, even though I met you like 3 weeks ago.
But coming from a manager's perspective, I used to, you know, work as a manager. When you give the keys to the manager or to the agent, like, you guys are still involved. So I want to stress that too. It's not like you give this responsibility to somebody else and expect them to kind of work magic. Like you said, there's no magic bullet of them kind of doing stuff. As a band, as an artist, you're still involved, making decisions, getting involved, still networking. You're still out trying to, you know,
Totally.
create opportunities as much as possible as well.
You're adding to your team.
Yeah.
They just make things a little easier in certain ways, you know, and it's also good just to have someone else to be like, no, that's a terrible idea, you know, why would you do that, you know?
Any questions about building a team, managers, agents?
Do you think all this is harder for like a solo act?
So the question is,
Like it's very big, but it's a big question.
no, it's a good thing for a solo act. Do you think this is more difficult? I mean,
I think
don't
it's
know.
got its pros and cons.
Yeah.
I mean, like, it's a lot easier for a solo act to just throw their guitar in a Camry and hit the road and just go do things, you know? And I
Not be
think
mad
that's
at the people in the
one-
van with you.
There's 6 of us.
Yeah.
I'm the only girl. I have to sit in a van with them for 8 hours.
You have to sit in a van with Janae for a couple hours.
Yeah.
So yeah, pros and cons. I mean, because we can definitely spread, you know, like some of our responsibilities amongst like the band, but at the same time, like we also then have to deal with coordinating everybody's schedule so we can get together for rehearsals. We got to make sure that everybody's available if a gig comes up, and make sure that travel's arranged, and that, you know, this, that, and the other thing, you know, especially like making a bigger trip to like South by Southwest, making sure that everybody can afford to go, because, you know, you're not going to go down to South by Southwest without a key member of your band just because, you know. So I think it's definitely got its pros and cons for sure. Some things can be easier, some things can be a little harder.
Even setting up a show. I mean, you know, there's 6 of us, and we can get pretty loud sometimes, and we have to think, well, we don't want a band that's 2 people that's kind of soft going after us. So, you know, the solo act or the duo usually is going to get the first or second slot. So to be able to really build and play to 1,000 people as a solo act, I would say that's going to be more difficult. But to get there might not be, you know, I mean, you can go around in your little VW van by yourself all around.
I think you're definitely an advantage in terms of making money.
Yeah, definitely.
Splitting it 6 ways is really kind of, you know.
And
I would
most
say also here on campus, there's a lot of resources. So I would say if you're a performer, you know, like go check out the Music Business Club and find those other people and find those team members. They don't have to be in the band, or maybe you can just do like a trial version or something like that. I don't think a big agent or manager is going to pick you up right away because you don't have a following or a record or any of those type of things. But these young, you know, students, they don't have any context, but they have a lot of passion. They're organized, so they want to get involved in the industry just as much as you do. So find some of those networks. Use a Pro Arts Connect. There's other smaller niche groups like the Berkeley A&R Club. They're looking for songs and stuff like that. So use the resources here. Ask a lot of questions because there are pros and cons, but you can make it happen yourself too. Do you have a question?
Oh, yeah. How do you even go about getting an agent or a manager? Like, do they have to come to you or do you go to them?
So the question is, how do you get a manager or an agent?
Yeah, well, that's what everyone told me. I remember people would be like, "Oh, you guys are so good. You should get an agent." I'd be like, "How do you do that?" And they're like, "Well, an agent has to come to you." And I'd be like, "Oh, how does?" And it was like years went by, and I was like, "I have no idea how to make this happen." But it was sort of a thing where just be aware of agents that might get to one of your shows and keep them updated. Don't hit them with emails every month, but maybe like once every 6 months, just be like, here are like things that happened over. We just sold out Great Scott. We just were written up on Pitchfork or something.
They're looking for new acts. They're looking for milestones that say this is an act or a person or a band or whatever that could be taking the steps to go up, and and they just want to see that in what you're doing. They want to see you listed at certain clubs. They want to see that you're bringing an audience in, that you're progressing and not just necessarily playing the same places, and
And you can use like other artists that you're playing with as kind of as, I don't want to say step stool because it sounds negative, but for example, when we played with the Promise Ring at the Paradise, their booking agency is Flower Booking. So shortly after that show, it was a pretty successful show. We just shot them an email. We're like, hey, we just opened for one of your artists. Here's our press kit. Here's that. Just to
Get on their radar.
on the radar.
I think one thing to remember too is that that sort of manager or agent relationship isn't necessarily permanent, and I think sometimes it's good. I mean, like, we are working with somebody who's young and is very much developing their own career right now, but they're working incredibly hard because they're trying for themselves as well as us, and that's just as important. So like, do they have a ton of experience under their belt? No, but they're working twice as hard as somebody who might have a ton of experience under their belt. They're not leaving any stone unturned. They're passionate. They believe in it, and I think that's a good place to start. And then you can help build a mutual, make things mutually beneficial there, and kind of step it up from there. And like I said, she brought an agent to one of our shows at South by Southwest, and so like it can definitely help. Once you get one, I feel like gets easier to open more doors into other realms to get more help and build your team.
Yeah, things like we're learning right now is like we just started working with this manager, and he explained that you get the agent, the manager, and then you get a lawyer, and then the label. And that's something that I had never even thought about. Like, no one tells you these things. You kind of have to like know who to talk to. It just like so we just started working with like the first thing our manager did that was really great was he got us like a free lawyer because we're working with Harvard Law, and they pair you with a student, and they have like a whole concentration there where it's just entertainment law, and there's also a faculty member. So once you get one part of the team in place, it opens a lot more doors to bring in those other people. It still takes a while. We got the agent first, and then it took us about a year to get a manager. But
and the manager did cite the agent as a factor in why he was interested.
They want to know that there's a team. That's not just them going out on this limb. And there was, after about a year working with our agent, it was sort of like, oh, we should have a manager. But now it started to get like, how come no one's come out? But that's really important.
Similar to the blog situation we talked about before, of get your own things together and almost like make it easy for them to say, okay, this is an easy home run. So, who has a website here? So all of you guys, I would say, I don't know if you guys would agree or not, at least have some kind of website, have a press kit together, have photos together, have a touring history on there, so they can keep tabs on you. And as you get these wins or these bigger gigs, you can kind of keep track of these things, because when they Google you, who knows what comes up. But if you can have a website, you can be in control of that content. So you can kind of cultivate, okay, here's the 2 YouTube clips that I want them to see. Here's the pictures I want them to see. So if you have a website, it would be important to have that and share that with them. Because
And to jump on that that path, it's really important to have a good sounding demo or recording. So I know it's really easy for everybody to record on their laptop or on their iPad now, but when somebody hears you, they might not know why they don't, like if it's a really lo-fi or just low budget recording, not to say that you have to go out and spend $1 million on your demo, but people, even like average non-musicians can hear the difference in quality. They might not know what they're hearing, but it's easy to hit skip on your iPod or your, streaming music online somewhere. But so you want your music to stand up next to your hero's music. So if you come up in a playlist somewhere, someone doesn't skip you.
Make sure people can find you. Like, have your homepage where it has the links to everything, but like everybody, digests the internet in a different fashion. Some people like Twitter, some people like Tumblr. I don't really know how to use Tumblr, but we have one. It's mostly just like a glorified Instagram feed for us, and sometimes I reblog things when I log in and look at it, but like it's another place for people to find us, and it links back to our Facebook or back to our website. And it's so easy to have a website now. Like, you don't have to be a graphic designer or hire a graphic designer. Like, there are a lot of really great options. Squarespace is one of them. WordPress has a lot of stuff that's just kind of easy to build, and doesn't, just put a little time into it because it's worth it. Like, I mean, when we first started, you'd Google the field effect and a bunch of stuff about field effect transistors would come up, and then like maybe the 8th search result was something about our band. But we are active on all of our social channels. We have a homepage, and now when you Google the field effect, the top 4 search results all go back to us, be it our website, our Facebook page, our Bandcamp, where people can download and buy our music and everything like that. So, overtake all those channels so that when people try and find you on the internet, they're not going to have to go searching for a needle in a haystack.
There's a shameless plug. The career jam I was talking about before, this Saturday there is a workshop how to build your own website. So it's free, like I said, over Uchida. So no excuse not to have a website next time we see you guys. Any other questions at this point?
There's one other thing I just wanted to say. I forgot when you talked about getting a manager who's young and hungry. A lot of really well-known managers started that way. We met. One of the first things we did was we took Guster's manager out to lunch 5 years ago, and he was a guy that was just a friend of theirs from Tufts when they were all students, and he grew up with the band. And I think that's how a lot of those relationships start, where it's just someone who really believes in the band. And I think that can be a really good way. If it's someone who works really hard and they're smart and they know, the guy, the Berkeley alum who manages Carmen, he was the guy. He was let's look at the Billboard Hot 100 and we'll record covers, and then maybe one of them will go viral, and then they're on Ellen the next day, and he's a trustee of Berkeley now. He's 27. So if you've got someone smart and they know how the music landscape is, and how to sort of manipulate it now, that's almost better than getting someone who just has connections in it. You don't want to be the 4th person on someone's roster where they've got one moneymaker, and then you're at the very bottom of their totem pole and they barely think about you. We know another band who had that. I'm not going to say who they are, but they had that situation where they were just there was one act that made all the money, and they were just sort of the young developing act, and they just had no relationship with their manager. So I think it's almost preferable sometimes, if you've got someone who's young and hungry and smart, it's sometimes good things can come from that.
Yeah, I always suggest in advising students, look at your friends, look at your family, look at a fan. It's almost like dating somebody, you just don't want to jump into whomever, but you want to build a relationship. You want to feel them out, do a trial period, and see if you like them, and if you like it, put a ring on it, right? Any other questions, thoughts, concerns? You guys have a great group of panelists here. Touring, networking, getting started in Boston.
Could you talk more about the publicity angle on things, and again, when you bring in professional help, and what sort of things you need to do to again attract that press coverage, maybe even beyond the blogs, but to more
traditional.
Yes, traditional media.
I would say getting a publicist that's the one part of the team that you can get. They don't really have to come to you necessarily. So that's something that I would recommend doing when the time is right. And the right time to do that would probably be about 3 months before your first album comes out or your first. I mean, everything is different now. It used to be there was like a traditional album cycle, and that still exists. But now you can, some artists will just release a video every month or something like that. But it's still pretty event-based, so you don't want to just hire a publicist if you don't have anything going on, because they have nothing. They can't just magically make stuff happen for you. But that's definitely something that other parts of the team want to see. When we first started working with Agent, they had us hire a publicist right away, and that made them feel more secure about when we play a new market and knowing that we'll get press coverage in that new market. But that's one thing that you do have some control over. The thing about it is, there's a lot of people out there who will charge a lot of money and not really get you any results. So you need to make sure that it's someone you can trust and someone that does have the connections that you want. See who their clients are, and if they're getting written up by all the websites that you read and the places you want to be, then they probably have connections at those places. You don't want to hire some sort of roots music publicist if you're playing punk music or something like that. So I think that's a really important first step.
There's also stuff you can do though, even before you get to the publicist stage. I mean, little things as little as I know a lot of people, and I've been in bands with people who do this too. You finish recording, you're really psyched about it, you just throw it right up on Facebook or tweet about it, and then you've lost your opportunity to promote it, because the bloggers and the traditional media, they want something that they can deliver that's going to be not just something you grab on Facebook or something. Same thing, even something as simple as publicity photos. You can hold that stuff back and have a plan for when you want to release it. Oh, we've got this big show coming up. We'll use this new picture. It sounds stupid, but it's kind of a thing, And you keep that in mind when you're pitching, the newspaper or the local music show or the music blog or whatever it is you're trying to do, and try to give them an angle, even before you spend money on a publicist. You can do all that sort of stuff.
First listen, or this newspaper or blog, the first to premiere this video or something like that.
Yeah, premieres are really big. It's if you have something like a new song you're going to release, don't release it yourself, because you're probably going to be able to find someone who can release it, who will want to release it for you, because you can promise them X number of clicks. The media is just so fragmented now that everybody's looking for anything that they have that's their own. So if you give someone an exclusive on a new song or new video, it's you can get bigger press than you might think, because it might be getting, they could be the 20th blog that day to write about the new Led Zeppelin reissue, or they can be the only website that has this one song. So they might get more traffic from this unknown band than they would from someone a much bigger band.
That's what we did with our last full length. Before we released it, we were in talks with Michael Murata, who at the time was the music editor at the Phoenix, which is a really cool publication that no longer exists. Rest in peace. But we asked him if he'd be interested in releasing a single from the album ahead of time, and sure enough, he put it up on the website, and it was written about in the paper that our single was MP3 of the week, and their site got a ton of traffic, and there we were at the
Yeah, and then
top.
later, right before the actual release show, they did a big spread, and we were the first Boston band to be in their column, What's Effin' Next? And it was right before we put the record out, and right before a big show at Brighton Music Hall, and that show ended up, I think, almost sold out. Brighton
It's
Music Hall.
4 people away from being sold out.
So,
And that's a big room. So
it was good timing all around. It started with that sort of single with the MP3 of the week, and then when the full album was ready, it was much bigger story, big color picture and everything.
One thing to be careful about with publicity, though, is it doesn't guarantee anything. You can have a great coverage of a record or something, and you could have a snowstorm happens. There could be something else going on in town. One of the local teams could be in the playoffs, so everyone goes to watch that, or there's something else going on. Even none of it's going on. Maybe half the city's out for the weekend or whatever, and it's no guarantee. It doesn't mean it's a bad thing, but it's something to sort of keep in mind that we did all that work to get that press, and we got all that press, and we had 5 people at the show. What's the point? It's a marathon. It's not a sprint.
Yeah, I remember I was really discouraged when like MTV tweeted, we did a song premiere with MTV.com, and they tweeted it to 7 million people, and we had -1 Twitter follower that day. And like nobody, because it's like, they tweet like 1 million times a day, and it's like no one's ever heard of us, so it's kind of like, so it's really, really hard to, you might get some really influential blogger that has like 40 people that read the blog, that it means more to get somewhere like that. You never know what's going to happen, and there seems to be like so little correlation between press and how many people come to the show. That's really just, it can be really frustrating sometimes, because it's just so hard to tell what is the thing that's bringing people out and what's keeping them from coming out.
I remember reading something with Ian McKay, the dude from Fugazi and Minor Threat. He would talk about all these people that love Minor Threat. Where the hell were they when we were playing shows? There were like 10 people at our shows. So you have to keep that sort of thing in mind.
Yeah, Pavement, when they did their reunion, they were selling out like huge rooms everywhere, but they didn't get like huge crowds at all when they were a band. It's like it wasn't until they did their reunion tour and their legend had grown. Anyway, you had a question?
Yeah, I did. Now we do have like a school publication here, which I am, and quite a few people are involved in. From like a sort of local art act trying to go national perspective, is there any like specific things that you like seeing in the press about you?
Us?
Just like as a band, as an artist in the position that you're in, like what sort of things do you like people to write about?
Man, I think it's just great when we see something, period. I mean, it's definitely disheartening if it's like a negative something for sure, but like even if it's just a small little blurb as simple as like, oh, the Field Effect wrote a cool song, like it's just fun. It's like it feels validating, I guess, like somebody's paying attention. I don't think it matters how big or how small. My parents are always, I have like multiple copies of every publication we've ever been in, and every time my parents come up to visit, they take another stack home. Like, it's just I think it's just a cool thing in general, just to get that kind of recognition in print or online or whatever.
Like no matter how small it is, even or big or small, we'll usually, if we're in a magazine, we'll take a picture of it,
throw it all over the
throw
internet.
it on our Instagram, and it just looks good to other people. They're like, oh, Doug and Annie's band is like getting written up, and they might not read it, but it looks good. And when you're trying to book a show out of town, and the booker goes to your Facebook page to see what you're all about, they'll see stuff like that, and they're like, oh, these guys, they're legit. So
it doesn't matter the publication.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
It could be anything. Nobody, even if it's a small publication, it might have a cool name, and they might think it's some cool website or something, and you never know. So I mean, I think every little bit helps.
I think in terms of like reaching, the hardest thing is getting press that reaches new people, versus press that people who already follow you or are impressed by. That's the hardest thing. Like the MTV thing was an example. It's like, it's really, I think there are certain people in the press that are more influential than others. Like there's just so many blogs out there, or I mean everything is a blog now. So. And I remember when the guy from Pitchfork came here and did the Zaffris lecture last year. I remember, I'm not even like a huge fan of that website, but I remember he was talking about how like their snobbiness is the reason why they matter. It's like we're super snobby, and that's why people read us, because we're so selective about what we like. We might write about some like obscure black metal band one day, then it'll be like Beyonce the next day, but it's because we like both of those things equally, and that's what sets them apart. There's a lot of these websites that will just write about pretty much anything. There's just so much noise out there. So there are, I think like whatever kind of music you play, try to find who are the real tastemakers in that genre of music. Like I think Bob Boylan from NPR is a really good example of someone who, they don't put out that much stuff, but when they do put it out, they tend to really champion it. And that reaches a lot of people, and he also has access to all the NPR national news shows, so those people sort of become aware of you. But it's really hard to find press and media outlets who can bring new fans, I think, because you just never know how many people are reading it. When you go to a website, I rarely go to some website and just click on some like a band I've never heard of. Just there's like millions of stuff every day that comes out about bands I've never heard of, and it's hard to know where to go. So I think the more selective the people are, the better.
Sometimes just not even going to something that's music oriented. We
Yeah,
were
I was gonna say that.
we were lucky enough, like the first video we did for the last album came from a concept our singer had where he saw his nephew, he was like 4 or 5, and enjoyed dressing in dresses, and so he made this video that for a song called "The Sun Gonna Let Me Shine" that essentially was showing you be who you want to be, and this kid and all these kids wearing dresses, boys, and we got I think a New York Times blogger blogged about it,
Huffington
not
Post.
because of the band so much. I mean, they liked the video and the song, but it was about this gender
The
issue.
content of the
And there
video.
was something on the HuffPost that was about it, and it ended up in the New York Times and stuff, and it unexpectedly generated a lot of press for
The
us.
Huffington Post parents did a feature
Yeah.
on
Great.
it.
An
It's a weird
outlet
place.
you wouldn't have expected, you know, and so you reach people this way, and maybe you're like, oh, you know, I don't care about the HuffPost, or I don't care about, you know, Family Affair, all these other weird, you know, magazines that aren't music oriented, but that's, you want to get in front of not just other musicians, but people who are going to listen to music and buy it, you know, and a lot of times Pitchfork is, like you're saying, music snobs and musicians saying, well, where's my review, you know, in there, and you want to get in front of people that are actually going to listen and possibly buy the music,
There was
buy a ticket.
There was a Nobel Prize winning economist who came to our show in New York to be open for Lucia's, and we were some of the band was really excited over it, and so he blogs about the music that he goes out and sees, and so he wrote about the Lucia's show the next day, and he commented, he mentioned Kingsley Flood open and said something about how they were quite good, but the music was too loud for his ears, and we were like, yes. And so we tweeted the crap out of that. We put it on Facebook, all over. I mean, we just thought it was awesome.
If he had said anything negative, it would have crushed me. Huge
But I
Paul
mean,
Krugman
yet
fan.
again, I mean, you know, most people who are reading that are not looking for music, and so our name was out there to all the economists in the world.
Well, it's like I don't follow that many economists, but the
Yeah.
one that I follow is that guy.
That guy.
So it's sort of like, you know, I wouldn't care if another economist came to the show, but because he did, you know.
Yeah.
It's like, I'm sure people that read his column because they want to read about, you know, the deficit, you know, they probably don't read that many music blogs, so when he talks about a musician, they probably listen, you know,
Yeah.
I would assume. I don't know if that's the best strategy, is to go after economists.
Probably not, but
Yeah, all publicity is good publicity, right?
right.
All right, well, we're just about out of time. I just want to thank the panel. I want to give them one last second to maybe, if you guys are cool with this, maybe like one quick sentence of inspiration to give our students and their people watching online. So you want to go down the line or anybody jump in? There's one quick takeaway each of you guys want to share? Or?
I mean, I'm just gonna go back. Don't be a dick. Like,
Yeah.
you know, be nice, make friends. Don't go out there thinking like, what can these people do for me? You know, get to know these people and you know, become their friends and make them want to help you out. Yeah, I mean, just be nice and work hard and give it your all every single show. Like, even if there's 5 people there, like, sometimes it doesn't feel that great, but again, you never know who might be standing out there.
Yeah, I was gonna go kind of along the same lines, and while it like the big picture, you are kind of competing against your peers and other musicians, but you don't treat it like a competition. And when you're out seeing shows, you know, don't badmouth the people on stage or like point out the flaws. Oh, he missed that note or whatever.
Save that for the band.
Yeah, yeah.
Well,
Totally.
first of all, because even if I would say that to Doug, you don't know who's listening to you, and it's a small world. Like, every scene is small. The world is small. So you don't want your reputation, you know, to get in the way of your success, and just, you know, yeah, be nice.
I would say stay true to what you want to do, and if you don't feel like you're doing what you want to do, and you're finding that some things aren't fun, reevaluate exactly what the situation is, and find how you can have fun and be yourself. I mean, it's not going to be fun if you're slugging, you know, a huge cab around by yourself every night, over and over, and you're not growing. You know, make sure you're growing as a person and as a musician or whatever you want to do.
Yeah, I'd continue with Doug's "Don't be a dick" theme. I mean, you know, you want to appeal to the people, and you want people to, you know, be engaged by you. And part of that is just remembering that you're doing this because you love to do it, and don't be bitter because the world doesn't owe you anything. You want to make it as a musician. You want people to want to listen to your music. You need to appeal to them. They don't have to come and see that you're a genius or something like that. So just be really cool about it. And then on those hard times, like when you're playing to a show to 5 people, put on a great show. And sometimes you'll find like maybe you won someone over, maybe you didn't, maybe it didn't matter, but you had a great show and you felt good about what you played, and maybe you learned something new, or maybe you didn't. Maybe you just had maybe it was a bunch of stuff that happened, but you just keep doing it, you know. And yeah, I guess I'll trail off there.
I just want to say keep your feet on the ground and keep reaching for the stars.
That's it?
That's it.
Perfect. A couple of shameless plugs real quick. Kingsley Flood, check out their website, kingsleyflood.com. Thefieldeffect.com, check out their website. They're doing a show April 3rd at Great Scott. Check them out. That'd be a great place to get plugged into the scene. You guys are doing some recording in a couple of months or so. So follow them on Twitter, get on their Facebook page, ask them questions. They're great people, as you can tell. They're very accessible, so talk to them. Career Jam this Saturday, 12 to 5. Please RSVP. Hope you guys can make it. But let's give them a round of applause. Thank you so much for coming. Appreciate it.
Also, if you ever want to chat, I'm the catalog librarian, so I can answer any of your questions. So.
For those in public, so that it doesn't affect people who are watching the streaming, we also have a resource guide. So
Yeah, I know.
are right here, but also resources that we have in the library.
Where our name was popping up on the radio, we got some airplay. Our name popped up in local magazines, so yeah, that was.
Yeah, that was kind of the launching part. We met some people. Richard Bouchard was running a blog called Boston Band Crush at the time, and he was kind of one of the first people to start writing about us, and he eventually introduced us to Michael Murata, who was working for WFNX in the Phoenix, and he kind of took us under his wing from there. When FNX went to an online station, put us in regular rotation, started writing about us a bunch in the Phoenix, and it just everything kind of steadily grew from there, and I can trace all of that pretty much back to that one opportunity opening for a band at the Paradise.
So I'd like to jump back a little bit. How did you guys get that gig? What's the story that kind of got you to that point? I think that's what I think for a lot of young artists that I counsel here at the college of, they're doing the gigs, they're doing the bar scenes, they're doing house parties, those type of things. But to get one of those opening acts, can you share a little bit about that process?
My day job, I work in a recording studio in Brighton, right down the street, really. And my boss was a producer for the band that we opened for, the Sheila Divine. He was their producer for a long time, and he actually plays with them live just because they were a trio. So he just fills in extra guitar work and stuff like that. And so because I work at the studio, I get dibs on free days. If there's a holiday and nobody wants to book it, I can bring projects in that I want to work on just in my spare time. And so he heard a little bit of what we were working on, and he was digging it, and came to see us and brought another member of that band,
Jim Gilbert.
He's the bass player, and Jim has since become one of our biggest mentors, and they liked it enough, and they had a release party coming up for.
Cool. So yeah, and then we have a kind of a good context of where they're coming from currently. I'd like to kind of get a little bit of sense of, what are those growing pains that first started out, maybe that first year of the band, or maybe was there any kind of big break that helped you kind of get over the hump of just playing, local bars or gigs or however. So can you guys maybe talk about that first year of the band, of how things kind of came together?
I remember one of the first kind of heartbreaking things for us. We drove up to Gloucester. Our drummer's from Gloucester, and one of his friends' bands was playing a show at this place called Dog Bar, I believe. And the place was kind of filled out for the other band was doing 2 sets, and we were playing in between. And there were a bunch of people there, and they finished their first set, and everybody went outside. And then we played for 5 or 6 people, and then after we played, everybody came back inside, and the place was packed again. It was just cool. That was fun.
But there were a lot of those sorts of shows are important. You cut your teeth, you develop your dynamic and your energy and chemistry on stage. So you have to expect to play
For
some
like
of
no
the,
one
you know,
sometimes. And you never, they were like,
crappy shows.
the 6 people that were there kind of dug it. So that felt good. But I think one of like our big breaks that kind of happened in the first year was we were asked to open for the Sheila Divine at the Paradise Rock Club, and that put us in front of a lot of people that had never heard of us, and it kind of really kickstarted everything for us from then on out. After that,
oh, sorry
yeah.
to interrupt. Sorry. There were a lot of people at that show who were really involved in the scene here in Boston that we've become such a big part of, and so that was the first time we were showcased within this scene. There were some radio folks there, some press folks there, and there was a series of like aftershocks from that show alone.
And now is playing musically in the local scene from about 2005 to present. Sound about right? Next we have Chris. Chris is done everything from 90s indie rock guitar bands to big bands, and he plays trumpet, keys, and percussion and everything else in Kingsley Flood. And then we also have Janae. She plays violin, saxophone, background vocals, doing everything in Kingsley Flood, and she helps with her opinion and advice as much as possible if people want to hear it. Annie Hoffman, she is in the other band called The Field Effect. She's a bassist, and she's also a Berkeley alum, and she's also a staff engineer at Zippa Records in Brighton. And Doug Ori, he's the lead singer, rhythm guitarist in The Field Effect. He's also a songwriter, and he's also a Berkeley alum as well. Doug does want you to know that he also has a beard. So, just want to clarify.
You do?
So,
yes.
Oh, I never noticed that before.
Yeah.
cool.
I like-
So as you can kind of tell,
Nice
these
work.
guys are really open. They're easy to talk to. So I want to kind of give you some context of where they are currently, and then we'll kind of go backwards a little bit in time and see how they got to this place, and see some of the tools that they use, some of the resources that they got to where they are, and what they're doing currently. So if one representative, or if you guys want to kind of chime in together, give a little bit of context about the band currently. What kind of venues are you playing in Boston? How many Facebook likes do you have? Do you have a website? Do you have an agent, a manager? Can you give me like a quick 30, 60-second pitch about your band at this point?
Yeah, so right now we just got back from South by Southwest. It's our second trip down to Austin. Most recently in Boston, we played at the Paradise Rock Club with Bad Rabbits and Clifflight for the Do 617 launch party. We make the rounds. We got a show coming up at Great Scott. And we've been kind of steadily building up our social media presence, close to 1,600 likes, I guess, on Facebook, and almost 800 followers on Yield Twitter. We're working on a new record, our second record, and pretty excited about it. That's kind of where we're at now.
So how long have you guys been around? Is Boston where you guys started?
Yeah.
And how long have you guys been doing it so far?
I think we're about to turn 3, or we just turned 3. So not too terribly long, but
Yeah, 3 sounds right.
All right. What about from you guys?
Should I go? All right. So, wow, so open-ended. So we started, I think, 5 years ago. There's been a lot of lineup changes, but I was one of the first people. The singer of the band knows everything, and he's not here, so we're just going to do our best. We started playing, and then we went through like a almost complete lineup change where Chris and Janae joined, and then things sort of started to really come together after that. Our last
4
show.
years ago too. So.
4 years ago, yeah. So, our last show was at Paradise. It was the Hot Stove Cool Music show, which is a big fundraiser thrown by Theo Epstein and Peter Gammons, who are like sort of Red Sox affiliated people. And what else? What else was part of that question?
What kind of venues are you guys playing currently? And
So yeah, Paradise in Boston. We play DC a lot. Play New York. Usually try to play Boston, New York, and DC twice a year each. We've been playing Philly a lot more, and then we hit some smaller markets in the Northeast, like Northampton and Portland. And occasionally we'll get out to the Midwest and do Chicago and Madison and Minneapolis. but have not hit the West Coast yet. That's probably sometime next year we'll try to do that.
Where are you based?
We're here
For Boston.
in
We're lead
Boston.
singers in DC, so go back and forth between the two.
Yeah, it's kind of a weird situation.
Yeah.
All right. Good evening, everybody. How's everybody doing? Good. Thanks for coming out. We've got a really great panel of people here to talk to you. My name is Eric. I'm from the Career Development Center here at Berkeley, and my role is here is to help students connect with the right resources, the right people, the right advising as much as possible. On your seats, there are a little note. This is an event tonight to help you prepare for an event this Saturday. It's called the Career Jam, and it's 12 to 5. It's going to be in the Uchida building. There's a website, berkeley.edu/career-jam. And if you can, please RSVP. It's going to be very limited space. But what's happening there is there's going to be a bunch of music industry professionals. They're going to talk about building your career in performance and technology and writing and film scoring, all sorts of things. There'll be an artist resource fair with a bunch of different kind of companies that will help you get along the way. Presskit.to is one that will be there to help you with your press kit. The Recording Arts Project from Harvard, which is free legal advice for musicians for you guys. That would be great people to get in touch with. So if you can, check out the website, RSVP. If you can, that would be greatly appreciated. Tonight, we have a great panel. I'll introduce them real quick, and then we'll kind of get into it. Just keep in mind, this is an open conversation. It's not a lecture. We want you guys to ask questions. They're very funny individuals. You'll tell from just getting to hear from a little bit. A little bit background about myself. Before I came to Berkeley, I was a booking agent, a manager, worked as a touring bassist in New York, so I'll chime in with a little bit about this stuff. But tonight really is going to be about building your career. How did they got started? They're both in really, I would say, big bands for Boston. They're really up and coming. They have a really great following, really great social media presence. If you can, check out their websites. If you want to follow up with them afterwards, they'll be more than welcome to do that. But I'll go down the list real quickly. Nick Balkin, he is the bass player for Kingsley Flood. He grew up in New York, went to Ithaca, moved to Boston in 2001.